Imagine this, let's make a bold assumption. Suppose one day you are an ice sculptor, and you get approached on the street by a headhunter from Squid Game who offers you a sum of money you simply can't refuse. But the task you receive is to create an ice sculpture inside a sauna, where the temperature is a constant 40 degrees Celsius with rolling waves of heat. Your mission is to use a massive block of ice to carve out the appearance of your ideal life. You work desperately, carving out an exquisite house, an ideal partner, and a trophy inscribed with honors. Your hands are numbed by the ice, while your back is drenched in sweat from the intense heat. But the terrifying part is that the speed of your carving is only slightly faster than the speed at which the ice melts. Just as you finally finish fine-tuning the roof that represents wealth, the foundation representing youth has already melted into a puddle of water. You are forced to tear down the east wall to repair the west, freezing the melted water back into ice to patch up the collapsing corners. In your entire life, you have not created anything solid that lasts. You are merely anxiously maintaining this shape which is destined to disappear, amidst this immense void of alternating hot and cold. This is the modern version of the myth of Sisyphus, and it is a true portrayal of the inner state of many of us today. When you finally stop your carving knife and look at the water stains covering the floor, that colossal question emerges like a ghost, asking, what is this all for? What does it matter if I finish it, and does anything I do have any meaning? Hello everyone, the topic of this thought experiment program is to explore how to overcome nihilism. What is nihilism? Simply put, nihilism is depression in the philosophical sense. Its manifestation in daily life is the feeling that life has no prospects and is fundamentally uninteresting. There is nothing in this world particularly worth pursuing. Things have no distinction between high and low, anything goes. Life has no goal, and existence has no meaning. Every day involves going to work, getting off work, eating, collecting a salary, spending money, playing video games, binge-watching shows, hanging out with friends, buying clothes, and window shopping. You just eat, lie flat, and wait for death. Of course, if you ask such a person, do you enjoy living like this all day? He doesn't enjoy it, and he doesn't like this kind of life either. But he doesn't know how to change it, nor does he want to change it, he just lingers on like this. This is the daily manifestation of nihilism. Of course, if you speak from an academic perspective, nihilism is divided into many layers, such as ontological nihilism, epistemological nihilism, existential nihilism, political nihilism, aesthetic nihilism, and so on. Of course, these different layers of nihilism are more or less interconnected. But today we won't get too academic. We will discuss the problem of nihilism in the most everyday context. The nihilism we are talking about today is the inability to feel one's own life meaning and purpose. It is feeling that one's soul has nowhere to rest, lacking a vision for the future. Not knowing where one's life is heading. If one feels life is void, there are generally two main symptoms. One is, as mentioned, depression, feeling that nothing is interesting and feeling very down. There is another symptom, which is the formation of a so-called troll personality. This means finding everything objectionable. This doesn't work, that doesn't work, this is meaningless, that is meaningless. They have to spray a few bored, negative comments on everything they see. They must be getting paid for it. Otherwise, who would do work for free, right? So they have to criticize everything. Even spraying themselves, and you can't really do anything about them. They roast themselves first, then lie on the ground to roast you. What can you possibly do about that? If we find ourselves falling into nihilism, what should we do? Can nihilism be overcome? Can we find the meaning of life? Regarding this big question, we have invited 5 philosophers today. They will each provide different solutions to overcome nihilism. They are the Danish philosopher who advocates the supremacy of faith, Kierkegaard. The German philosopher who advocates voluntarism, Schopenhauer. The German philosopher who advocates the philosophy of the Superman, Nietzsche. The French philosopher who advocates existentialism, Sartre. And the French philosopher who advocates absurdism, Camus. Of course, since nihilism is a supermassive issue, the discussion in this short hour-long program today will certainly be incomplete. Today's introduction is merely a starting point. This program also serves as a simple overview of 20th century humanistic philosophy. If there are omissions or deviations in the introduction, friends are welcome to supplement and discuss in the comments. Okay, let's enter the main session of the meeting. First, let's invite the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard. We said earlier that nihilism is philosophical depression. So if we view nihilism as a disease, each philosopher we introduce today actually acts as a doctor. The flow of today's program is that first, each doctor will offer their diagnosis for the disease of nihilism. Then based on their different diagnoses, they will prescribe different prescriptions to overcome nihilism. You can judge which plan is more reasonable. Okay, let's look at Kierkegaard's diagnosis of the cause of nihilism. Kierkegaard's diagnosis for the cause of nihilism is the pursuit of rationalism, objectivism and holism in Western metaphysics, leading to the forgetting of authentic individualized existence, thereby leading to nihilism. This diagnosis might be hard to understand immediately. Philosophy often doesn't speak human language well. So let's explain what Kierkegaard means by this diagnosis. Kierkegaard was a Danish philosopher living in the first half of the 19th century. The mainstream philosophy at the time was Hegel's philosophy. And Hegel's philosophy is that typical rationalist, objectivist and holistic metaphysics we just mentioned. One could even say Hegel developed Western metaphysics to its peak. What is metaphysics? Of course it's not the static, isolated, one-sided way of thinking we learned in textbooks. This textbook explanation is not the same as the mainstream explanation in the philosophy circle. In the philosophy circle, metaphysics simply means dividing the world into appearance and essence. Of course, essence is higher than appearance. Appearance is not the truest existence. The truest existence is essence. The complicated world we can see and touch is just appearance. And behind the appearance, there is an essential world. This essential world is unified, eternal, pure, and beautiful. It should also be able to endow our lives with meaning. Metaphysics is pretty much what this means. Moreover, this metaphysics pursues a kind of universalism and holism theoretical system, meaning the essence or laws behind things are universally applicable and exist objectively, no matter what strange phenomenon you bring up. If you put it into this metaphysical system, I can explain it to you. As the saying goes, what exists is reasonable, meaning it can all be explained by reason. Hegel created such a comprehensive philosophical system of rationalism and holism. Anything put into Hegel's system can be explained in a rational way. Of course, saying this sounds slightly derogatory, because the philosophy of Kierkegaard we are introducing here attacks Hegel's philosophy as a target. Actually, not only Kierkegaard, but the philosophers introduced later, including Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, all developed their philosophical thoughts by targeting Hegel. One could say a major driving force of modern Western philosophy is criticizing Hegel. Of course, this program is about nihilism, so we can't explain Hegel's philosophy in detail. If we explain Hegel's philosophy simply through a metaphor, Hegel's philosophy is like an authoritative textbook you study seriously in school. This textbook is written to be extremely scientific, extremely rational, and very thick. It covers every problem you might encounter in the world. It also forms a perfectly rounded system, and the teacher has highlighted the key points for you. Grading different questions. If you master these questions, you reach the undergraduate level. If you master those questions, you reach the master's level. If you can master all these questions, then you reach the doctoral level. You level up step by step like fighting monsters, from primary school to doctorate, learning all the knowledge in the textbook. Then you take various exams in school, and you perform excellently every time. Basically, there are no questions you can't solve. Hegel's rationalist metaphysics is like this authoritative textbook, providing a total solution for the meaning of our lives. But Kierkegaard believes the cause of nihilism is that this is merely an illusion. This set of rationalist metaphysics has absolutely no guiding role when facing real life. It is equivalent to you, having memorized this textbook, graduating and being dumbfounded. You find that things in society don't follow the rules, they aren't on the exam syllabus at all. For example, you are about to graduate from university. Should you find a job or continue your studies? If you find a job, should it be a government unit or a private enterprise, enter the internet industry or the real economy? If you take the postgraduate entrance exam, should you go abroad or stay domestic? Continue your major or switch to a more promising one? If you take the civil service exam, should you apply for a low-paying job close to home or a high-paying one far away? How do you choose among these things? Which textbook can write down the correct answer for you? Or say you are ready to date and get married, you have feelings for two girls. If you marry Angela, you must give up Kate. If you marry Kate, you must give up Angela. But both Angela and Kate are great, there is no standard of superiority between them that can be clearly explained by reason. You must make an either-or choice between Angela and Kate. I want both is impossible, otherwise you would commit bigamy. Note that this isn't saying there is a correct option out there. Just that you lack sufficient information to know which is the correct option. No, it is that whatever you choose is right, and whatever you choose is also wrong. For example, facing the decision to do a PhD or not after a master's. There is no correct option. Choosing a PhD has a PhD's way of living. Choosing to enter society to work has a working life. And regardless of which you choose, you will wonder if the other option would have been better. Hesitation is the norm of life. Kierkegaard believes our lives frequently encounter these either-or hesitation scenarios. It is said our lives are full of predicaments like the trolley problem. And they are complex versions of the trolley problem. The trolley problem thought experiment at least clears out irrelevant variables for you. But life's problems are intertwined, complex, and clueless. Of course, the examples I just gave are very understated. The choice between Angela and Kate sounds like a joke. But friends present, if you are a living human being, you have certainly encountered scenes in your life where whatever you choose is right and whatever you choose is wrong. It does not exist that you learn mathematics, physics, philosophy. Then read Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Hegel, and you can make the correct choice. Impossible, nor is it that you post on Reddit, asking buddies how should I choose, and the top voted answer is the correct one. Impossible, this feeling of hesitation, helplessness, uncertainty, and anxiety cannot be clearly explained in words in this program. But friends present, if you have experienced it, you know. Life has no standard answer. Why is it like this? In Kierkegaard's view, this is because there is no rationalist, universalist, textbook-style solution to the meaning of life. Every one of us is a unique individual, different from all others. Kierkegaard says we are all lonely individuals. Therefore the so-called truth is only subjective truth. Consequently, for how each of us should live, there is no universal, textbook-style standard answer. Can you copy Elon Musk's success formula today and become a billionaire? Impossible. Your situation is completely different from Elon Musk's. And that rationalist, holistic, universalist metaphysics makes this mistake. It attempts to create an illusion for you that you are not special. You are not a unique individual, you are an average person, you are the same as everyone else. Therefore, it seems there exists a life-meaning solution applicable to everyone. As long as you read this textbook or listen to this master's class, you will be enlightened. You found the key to the correct life. But the actual situation is that this is just a phantom. Such a holistic solution does not exist. Instead, it leads to your forgetting of the truest individualized existence, leading to us being unable to live independently without the book. When you encounter real scenes in real life, the holistic plan only leaves you at a loss. This is Kierkegaard's diagnosis of the cause of nihilism. Having stated the diagnosis, let's introduce what prescription Kierkegaard gave to overcome nihilism. Later, when discussing Nietzsche, we will say Nietzsche's diagnosis of nihilism starts with God is dead. And for Kierkegaard, the direct cause of nihilism can be said to be Hegel is dead, meaning the rationalist, holistic metaphysics preached by Hegel doesn't work anymore. The textbook is useless. Since the textbook is useless, for major decisions in your life, you must make a decision yourself. Note that it is a decision. Decision means it is indifferent to whether it is rationally correct or not. So how do you solve this problem with no standard answer? Kierkegaard says do not forget, the most fundamental fact of human existence is we are each unique individuals, and truth is subjective. So if the external, rational, holistic textbook doesn't work, we need to return to the heart, return to a most intrinsic emotion within oneself. This emotion is irrational, inexplicable by logic, the innermost but most authentic experience. Let's use an example, still using Angela and Kate as examples. How to choose between Angela and Kate. There is no logic to speak of, it depends entirely on your irrational decision. Why do we say this? Imagine you later married one of them. For example, you married Angela, later one day Angela asks you why did you choose me? And not Kate, At this time, never give a rationalist answer. Don't reason with her, saying because you are prettier or because your degree is higher. Stupidly taking out the straight man diary from back then. The left page writes the pros and cons of marrying Angela. The right page writes the pros and cons of marrying Kate. Then summing up, the net benefit of marrying Angela is greater than marrying Kate. So the solution to this problem is marrying Angela. You shamelessly say to Angela, "Hey wife, look at this math problem. How rational, how objective, how persuasive." If you say this, Angela will probably want to kill you. Don't reason with your wife. This isn't saying your wife is an unreasonable person, but saying that for major life decisions, any reason is incomplete and flawed. For example, you say you chose her because she was prettier. Then she will ask you, if you meet someone prettier later, will you change your mind? Marrying a wife by calculating numbers isn't love, it's a transaction. So you cannot give a rational, logical answer. Instead, you must give a decisive, irrational, unreasonable answer. For example, an answer like this. I don't know why, although rationally you aren't as pretty as Kate. Your figure isn't as good as hers, your degree isn't as high as hers. I understand the logic, but in my heart there is an inexplicable, irrational, uncontrollable impulse. I just want to be with you. So your wife doesn't want to hear you give rational reasons. No, she wants to hear your attitude. Because in major life decisions, all logic and reason are powerless. Even absurd. And this choice of partner is just one example of major life choices. Since the meaning of life has no rational, objective, universal solution. In Kierkegaard's view, ultimately the attachment of your life's meaning needs to fall upon faith. The faith Kierkegaard talks about here is of course faith in God. And similarly, this faith is also irrational and unreasonable. In Kierkegaard's view, whether faith is true faith does not lie in rational weighing, but in a commitment, a vow. In whether you, when you are just your lonely, helpless self, dare to hand over your 100-something pounds completely. Face faith and make a leap. Kierkegaard opposed that kind of faith based on rational weighing, considering them all fake faith. In the history of Western philosophy, weren't there many efforts to prove God's existence through reason? Proving faith and rationality, Kierkegaard looked down on them all. Like the 17th century French scientist Blaise Pascal. Proving the rationality of faith in God through reason, creating the so-called Pascal's wager. Meaning we have to weigh our choice of whether to believe in God. He made a matrix, either God exists or God doesn't exist. Then another dimension is we either believe in God or we don't. Then various combinations, the conclusion reached is we should choose to believe in God. Because if God really exists, we win big. If God doesn't exist, we lose nothing. Then facing such a gamble, you don't have to be an old hand at the casino. As long as you are a smart person, you should choose to believe in God. To Kierkegaard, this is simply nonsense. You are being petty and calculating, so you are here calculating the cost-performance of believing in God. That such faith is too cheap. This is like your wife asking why you chose her and you taking out your straight man notebook. Calculating with her, if your faith in God is also calculated. That isn't faith, that is doing business. In this sense, Kierkegaard and the Hellenistic theologian Tertullian thought alike. Tertullian had a famous saying called "I believe because it is absurd." This means precisely because it is unreasonable. Faith in it is true faith. Faith that makes sense is just calculation. So let's come back, each of us is a unique individual. Therefore there is no rational, universal, textbook-style solution to life's meaning. To overcome nihilism lies in whether you dare to give yourself up without turning back. Finding a faith you are willing to be desperate for. Of course, although the faith Kierkegaard talks about here is faith in God. Placed in our context today, it doesn't mean we must believe in a religion. It asks, can you find that mission you are willing to be desperate for? That thing you are willing to make a commitment and vow to. Dreams are born of love, dreams are irrational. Because rational textbooks cannot guide your life. Okay, this is the introduction to Kierkegaard's diagnosis and solution. Having introduced Kierkegaard, let's introduce Schopenhauer's view. Good, now speaking of Schopenhauer, same old rule. Before prescribing, state the diagnosis first. Let's first talk about what Schopenhauer diagnosed as the cause of nihilism. Schopenhauer's diagnosis for the cause of nihilism is: it is because people are constantly driven by desire to pursue new satisfactions. thus producing nihilism. Why does satisfying one's desire cause nihilism? This requires starting from Schopenhauer's philosophical thought. And if we speak of Schopenhauer's philosophy, we must start from Kant's philosophy. Why? Because Schopenhauer's philosophy is inherited from Kant. Those of us who know a bit of philosophy know that in Kant's worldview, the world is divided into the phenomenal world and the essential world. We said before metaphysics divides the world into appearance and essence. But Kant's division here isn't metaphysical but epistemological. Meaning we humans can only know the phenomenal world, but regarding the essence of things, our cognition cannot access it. Using Kant's philosophical terms, we can only know things in the phenomenal realm. That is the phenomenal realm where our cognitive categories can project. For example, here is an apple. We can sense it as red through our vision. We can feel its silky texture and weight through our touch. We can smell its fresh scent through our smell. We can taste its sweet and sour flavor through our taste. But excluding these phenomena, if you ask me what the apple itself is, we cannot know this. Essence is not in time and space. Time and space themselves are forms of our cognition. Regarding the essential world, we are agnostic. We might call the things in this essential world the thing in itself, or translate it as the thing itself or the thing as such. The German original is Ding and Sich. This thing in itself is equivalent to the first driving force that allows us to have cognition of the appearance. Because this appearance isn't produced for no reason. It must have a first driving force to stimulate our cognitive forms. But regarding this first driving force itself, we cannot make any description of it. Even in this sense, we say Kant is an agnostic. Good. After speaking of Kant's philosophy, let's come back to Schopenhauer's philosophy. Schopenhauer on one hand inherited Kant's dualistic worldview, dividing the world into appearance and essence. But on the other hand, Schopenhauer also modified Kant's philosophy. Schopenhauer believed Kant's philosophy wasn't thorough enough. Kant's thing in itself isn't indescribable. In Schopenhauer's view, this thing in itself, this first driving force that allows appearance to be produced, is will. Will is the essence of this world. The birth and death movements of various phenomena we see in the empirical world are all driven by will behind them. Why does Schopenhauer say the thing in itself is will? First, let's talk about what is Schopenhauer's so-called will. This will doesn't just mean saying I want a promotion and raise, I want to marry a rich beauty. Such conscious and purposeful will of specific people. It isn't anyone's will, but an unconscious existence. It is a bottom layer, blind, uncontrollable impulse. It has no reason or basis, it is a pure tendency. This pure tendency is to seek survival, to seek existence. So Schopenhauer's so-called will is also called the will to live or survival will. English is will to live, a will to seek survival. This will to live is the essence of the universe. It drives the birth and death movements of all things in the universe. Using modern scientific terms, it's like saying everything has a will to resist entropy increase. Plants and animals constantly reproduce, cells constantly replicate themselves. Viruses constantly mutate, all are products driven by the will to live. Even including inanimate objects, they also move driven by the will to live. For example, water flows downwards, stones fall downwards. This is also resisting entropy increase. Stones falling is the effect of gravity. Only with gravity can they gather into planets. If you feel Schopenhauer's so-called will to live sounds a bit mysterious and hard to understand, you can understand it as Darwin's natural selection, although not very accurate but somewhat close. This natural selection is like an invisible hand making life constantly evolve. Life constantly foraging and reproducing, constantly seeking survival, constantly spreading its genes. If there is something beneficial to spreading genes, then natural selection will drive life to execute it. Moreover, this natural selection is purposeless. A revolutionary manifestation of Darwin's theory is that he overthrew the ancient teleological worldview. And Schopenhauer's so-called will to live is also purposeless. It isn't trying to seek survival in any specific direction. It is neither good nor evil. The will to live is a blind impulse. An indescribable primal instinct driving the operation of this world. Good. Having seen Schopenhauer's philosophy, we know this world is driven by the will to live. Then what consequences does such an ontology lead to in ethics? Schopenhauer believes this will to live driving everything is the root of all human suffering. Why say this? First, since the essence of the world is will. You as a phenomenon, all your actions, are actually driven by the will to live. Its manifestation is that you have various desires. Your various actions seem to be born of your own rational planning and free will. Actually, they are just tools for the will to live to realize itself through desire enticement. You are not free, you are just a slave to the will to live. For example, a most direct and resolute manifestation of the will to live is the reproductive will. This will to live wants to seek survival, so it must resist death. Then the way to resist death is reproducing offspring. This is the reproductive will. Human gender relations, love, marriage are nothing but tools for the reproductive will to realize itself. You think liking your god or goddess's moments is out of rational identification with the post they sent. No, you are a tool person. It is the reproductive will dominating you to like and comment on your god or goddess. Besides, do you think after pursuing your god or goddess, life becomes perfect? Like the fairy tales read in childhood, the prince and princess lived happily together. Then the screen fades to white, story ends. However, is real life such a plot? No, driven by the will to live, humans have infinite desires to satisfy. And there won't be a day of completion, you will suffer endlessly in the sea of desire. Either desire is unsatisfied, you are anxious and in pain. Or desire is satisfied, you feel as that it and fall into a sense of emptiness. This is like you preparing for an important exam in the finance industry 2 years in advance. You wake up early and sleep late to study hard. Full of expectation to pass and apply for Wall Street, for this you are anxious. You fear failure, but unluckily you didn't pass. You didn't get what you wanted, you are in pain, you are sad, you roll on the floor. Then the second year you took this exam again. This time you learned from the failure of the first year, and passed the second year. You are full of joy, the dream is finally realized. But do you think after success you are completely assured? This happy feeling of yours fades to flatness in less than 3 days. You find your life didn't enter a pure white state of supreme good because of this. Life is as usual, you start to feel bored and miss other things. You start to think it would be nice if I fell in love. Then you go pursue the opposite sex, another round of similar experiences. You jump from one vortex of desire to another vortex of desire. Never ending, there is simply no so-called ashore. The sea of bitterness has no bounds, there is no shore. There is only that brief illusion before satisfying this desire. Once stepping on this shore will move back, you will never truly go ashore. Here Schopenhauer said his famous quote, "Life swings like a pendulum back and forth between the pain of unsatisfied desire and the boredom after satisfaction." So what is the cause of nihilism, in Schopenhauer's view? The cause is you succumb to the will to live, constantly suffering in the sea of desire. This is the cause of nihilism. Good, having spoken of Schopenhauer's diagnosis, Schopenhauer will now prescribe the medicine. Since Schopenhauer's diagnosis of nihilism is that human life is dominated by the will to live. Then based on this diagnosis, Schopenhauer prescribed a solution, in one sentence: deny the will to live. Since the root of nihilism lies in the will to live, then to get rid of nihilism one must deny the will to live. Don't look for the meaning of life in illusory desires. Your attachment to desire will only cause your pain and boredom. That someone listens and says denying the will to live, isn't this asking people not to seek survival? That don't bother, I just jump from upstairs and end it all. Schopenhauer explicitly opposes suicide. Because suicide does not deny the will to live, but in an extreme way maximizes the fulfillment of the will to live's domination over you. The reason you want to commit suicide is precisely because you love your desire too much. You can't bear your insatiable desire, therefore suicide means you lose. This isn't overcoming nihilism, this is succumbing to nihilism. Suicide cannot deny the will to live. Then exactly how to deny the will to live? Schopenhauer prescribed 2 medicines, one is aesthetics, one is asceticism. Good, let's first talk about aesthetics. Why can aesthetics help people deny the will to live? Think, usually when you look at things around you, even looking at things on the internet, all are full of various desires, either exclaiming awesome or amazing, or exclaiming what trash. Now some comment sections are very hostile. This is the manifestation of being dominated by the will to live. Because you always judge these things with your own self-interest, so you can't look past it. So how to get rid of these desires, get rid of these interests? That requires appreciating artworks because aesthetics is disinterested. Aesthetics here doesn't mean swiping short videos but appreciating artworks like poetry, music, paintings, drama. When you appreciate artworks, you temporarily forget the self, forget your own desires. Aesthetics of art will suspend your own desires and interests. You won't rush to comment and judge but to empathize. For example, when you watch the Greek tragedy Oedipus Rex. If you are truly watching with empathy, you won't stupidly post a comment asking who is the bad guy here and tearing it up with people in the comments. But put yourself in his shoes and empathize deeply with Oedipus in the play, feeling the impermanence of fate. Appreciating paintings and music is the same principle. Artworks have a distancing effect that allows you to temporarily get rid of the impurities of desire. Can reach the so-called world of ideas, allowing you to reach a detached state. Reach inner peace. But let's be honest, after all, art aesthetics can only temporarily let you obtain inner peace. When you walk out of the theater or exhibition hall, before long you will be entangled by worldly disturbances again. You will return to the pendulum of pain and boredom. So to overcome nihilism, aesthetics is at best a primer. The real medicine has to be the next one, which is asceticism. Speaking of this, I have to introduce to everyone that Schopenhauer's philosophy is deeply influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism. So his philosophy sounds very Zen. The pendulum between pain and boredom mentioned by Schopenhauer, jumping from one desire vortex to another. Isn't this the suffering talked about in Buddhism? Then how to escape the sea of suffering and leave suffering for joy? Like Buddhism, Schopenhauer's philosophy also stresses asceticism. Because if we recognize the essence of the world as will, recognize the source of our pain as our individual will, then the ultimate solution for us to fight against the will to live is to completely give up fighting. People who lie down are invincible. Wanting to get rid of the torment of the will to live on people, we must clear our various desires. This way the will to live can't do anything to you. Using an old Chinese saying, one is strong without desire. Then how to live an ascetic life? Schopenhauer says first you must overcome sexual desire. Mentioned before, the most resolute manifestation of the will to live is the reproductive will. Sexual desire is equivalent to extending the will to live on you to after your death, letting your offspring continue to suffer the torment of the will to live. Thus your life is like being wound up, always looking for mates everywhere. When moving bricks you can't move many, when writing drafts you can't write many words. You miss your god or goddess to death. They ignore you, you still roll on the floor in pain. Can also demean them saying I wouldn't take such a person if given for free. Look, this reproductive will makes you schizophrenic. So if you want to get rid of the slavery of the will to live, you first have to abstain from lust. Don't read materials you shouldn't read, don't do work you shouldn't do. And don't expect to gain any life meaning from love stories. These are illusory. When you abstain from various desires, your heart will have a feeling of relief. When others encounter the torment of desire and roll on the floor twitching, you face these desires. For example, your goddess suddenly shows favor to you. You just smile slightly, heart without waves. Being ascetic, you completely give up the individual will. Only when you give up the individual will can you merge with the will driving the world's operation. And at this time you reach a state of nothingness. No desire, no self, filling your heart is incomparable joy. But at the same time your heart is like a calm water surface without a ripple. Since then you have got rid of the pendulum between pain and boredom. Reached the state of nirvana mentioned by Buddhists. This is Schopenhauer's plan to overcome nihilism. Good, having introduced Schopenhauer's plan, let's introduce Nietzsche's plan. German philosopher Nietzsche was deeply influenced by Schopenhauer's philosophy. When Nietzsche was young, he read Schopenhauer's book The World as Will and Representation. Deeply inspired, he became a fan of Schopenhauer. He himself wrote a book called Schopenhauer as Educator. It was also under the influence of Schopenhauer that Nietzsche started his own philosophical path. In Nietzsche's own words, Schopenhauer was his first and only educator. But Nietzsche later parted ways with Schopenhauer and his thoughts. Because Nietzsche felt Schopenhauer's thought was too depressing. Finally, even falling into Buddhist asceticism, Nietzsche did not agree with this. Nietzsche agreed with Schopenhauer that everything is dominated by will. But does having this premise necessarily lead to Schopenhauer's pessimistic conclusion? That is leading to denying the life will and moving towards Buddhist asceticism. Nietzsche did not agree with this conclusion. The key lies in Nietzsche making a different interpretation of the will proposed by Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer's will is a will to seek survival, will to live. And Nietzsche's will is a will that constantly wants to start things, will to power. We still understand from the contrast between will to power and will to live. This will of Schopenhauer is a passive will to seek survival. It is for living, for self-preservation. But Nietzsche believed the primary principle of life isn't just seeking survival but the release of life force. It is to make oneself stronger, fuller, richer. Thus it is always a kind of will wanting to create, wanting to start things, wanting to gain more power. Simply put, Schopenhauer's will to live is a passive will seeking self-preservation and reproduction. And Nietzsche's will to power is an active will wanting to start things and become stronger. One passive, one active. So based on a passive will to live, Schopenhauer finally moved towards completely denying the will. Moving towards Buddhist asceticism. Nietzsche says, why be so world-weary, what are you hiding from? Using the words of China's most famous writer Lu Xun, true warriors dare to face the bleak life in dripping blood. What are you afraid of? You have to stand up. We know Lu Xun's thought was also deeply influenced by Nietzsche's philosophy. Good, since Nietzsche agreed with Schopenhauer's philosophy in the early stage and later disagreed. Then regarding the view on nihilism, Nietzsche is naturally different from Schopenhauer. Good, same old rule, before giving Nietzsche's plan to overcome nihilism. Let's first talk about Nietzsche's diagnosis of the cause of nihilism. Although many of us haven't read Nietzsche's books, we must have heard. Nietzsche proposed a famous slogan called God is dead. What consequences does God is dead bring? God is dead caused European nihilism. Nihilism is the consequence of God is dead. Why does God is dead lead to nihilism? The reason is simple, because at that time people generally believed in religion. And people's life meaning was endowed by religious faith. Think about it, our lives are so short, we will all die. Everything in this world will turn to dust. But we have a longing for eternity. We will feel the meaning of life should be endowed by some eternal thing. So if we want to find meaning for our lives, we must transcend this shore world where everything flows and nothing stays. An anchor to a transcendent, eternal other shore world. Religion is such a product of faith in the other shore world. With that faith in the other shore, we feel everything we do on this shore is meaningful. I go to work, get off work, squeeze into the subway all day, these are meaningful. The more industrious and virtuous I am in this shore world, the more it shows I can get salvation and go to heaven. Our life on this shore must be linked to the reward on the other shore. This way we will live steadfastly on this shore. But due to the development of enlightenment and modern science, suddenly one day we learned God is dead. There is fundamentally no other shore, we only have this shore, no salvation will come. We live, then we die, then there is no then. Knowing the truth, my tears fall down. So Nietzsche threw out the slogan God is dead not with a gloating attitude. This isn't cheering but a painful declaration. God is dead, the era of nihilism has come, where should we go? Then does this mean Nietzsche advocates returning to faith in Christianity? Like the plan given by Kierkegaard before, facing faith and making a leap? Of course not. Nietzsche is a famous person who opposed Christianity. He wrote a book called The Antichrist. Nietzsche believed why people fall into nihilism is precisely caused by Christian faith in the other shore. How to say this? Just said God is dead is the cause of nihilism. How does this say believing in God is the cause of nihilism? That exactly is God dead or not? Actually the reason is simple, in Nietzsche's view there is no other shore at all. No other shore means no other shore, originally this wasn't a problem. But you believers in the other shore world fabricated a lie of the other shore. Making everyone believe it to be true, but lies will eventually be punctured. Once the lie is punctured, doesn't nihilism come? This is like saying this last month is almost Christmas. Originally I planned to collect the last month's salary and go home happily for Christmas. As a result, the boss ran over and told me not only is there salary but an extra $50,000 Christmas special bonus. I said such a good thing, thank you boss, thank you company. Then I worked very devoutly every day this month, working with a grateful heart. As a result, later you told me there is no Christmas special bonus at all, this is a lie. Oh, this made me lost. Originally if you didn't mention this I was quite happy. As a result now I feel like I lost $50,000. You say can I still have a happy Christmas? That same principle, precisely the lie of the other shore caused nihilism. Do you think Nietzsche criticized only Christianity? Of course not. He criticized all metaphysics that weaves lies of the other shore. What is metaphysics? We already explained when introducing Kierkegaard. Say again, metaphysics simply put is dividing the world into appearance and essence. The complicated world we can see and touch is just appearance. Behind the appearance there is an essential world dominating the appearance. This essential world is unified, eternal, pure, beautiful. It is also able to endow our lives with meaning. We mentioned before Hegel's philosophy is a kind of metaphysics. The metaphysics Nietzsche takes out as a target here is Plato's philosophy. Plato's philosophy is also typical metaphysics. Everyone knows Plato proposed the theory of forms. Meaning things in the world are not self-existent, things exist because they have forms. This table has the form of table, man has the form of man, good has the form of good. Forms are invisible and intangible, pure, eternal, residing high in the other shore world. In that painting by Raphael, Plato points a finger to the sky referring to that other shore world. If this Platonism just fooled people in small philosopher circles, it would be fine. You should know later this Platonism's users trickled down and spread to thousands of households. This is the later Christianity. In Nietzsche's view, Christianity is a variant of Platonism. Because both wove a set of lies about the other shore. Plato's philosophy also stresses immortality of the soul and retribution for good and evil. It's just that Christianity is Platonism with users sink down. Nietzsche calls it the Platonism for the people. Whether it is Platonic metaphysics or the people's version of Platonism Christianity. Both are built on the basis of the lie of the other shore. This is the cause of nihilism. Why does faith in the other shore lead to nihilism? This brings up a key point of Nietzsche's philosophy, which is the display of life force. Speaking of this, we have to go back to the divergence between Nietzsche and Schopenhauer regarding will. We said before Schopenhauer viewed the will to live as a passive thing seeking self-preservation and reproduction. So Schopenhauer finally moved towards denying the life will towards Buddhist asceticism. But Nietzsche believed the life will is a good thing. It is a will to power wanting to create, start things, inclined to release life force, making oneself stronger and more flourishing. Most fundamentally, how to define nihilism? In Nietzsche's view, nihilism is the denial of life force. Everything that denies life value and makes life force decay is nihilism. So let's come back. Why does faith in the other shore lead to nihilism? Because faith in the other shore leads to the suppression of real life force. You live this life on this shore to cash in on the happy life on the other shore in the next life. This life on this shore is not your ultimate goal, so will you still live this life well? Good, let's summarize. In Nietzsche's view, the cause of nihilism. On the surface, it is the collapse of faith in the other shore. Fundamentally, the cause of nihilism is the faith in the lie of the other shore itself. Because faith in the lie of the other shore suppresses the life force of this shore. Good, having spoken of the diagnosis, let's talk about Nietzsche's plan to overcome nihilism. Since the cause of nihilism is already very clear, which is faith in the lie of the other shore that suppresses life force, then how to prescribe the medicine is also very clear. Generally speaking, it is divided into two steps. One is destruction, two is construction. Good, let's first talk about the step of destruction. Destruction is to smash all Platonism and its variants, including metaphysics, including religious faith, and even including scientific rationality promoted by Enlightenment. These lies of the other shore that deny life value should be broken. Nietzsche wrote a book called Twilight of the Idols. The subtitle is How to Philosophize with a Hammer. This means using a hammer to smash all those lies of the other shore, these idols. Then, having finished the step of destruction, next we must enter the step of construction. What does Nietzsche want to construct? This brings us to Nietzsche's Superman philosophy. What is the Superman, Übermensch? Of course, due to the literary nature of Nietzsche's works, different scholars will have different interpretations. But we can roughly say the Superman is relative to God. Nietzsche said God is dead, the Superman is born, so the Superman is the God of this shore. When we smash the lie of the other shore, our meaning of existence no longer needs to be sought in the other shore. We need to create the meaning of existence for ourselves on this shore. God the old man is dead, we can only rely on ourselves now. We have to make decisions for ourselves, and the Superman is the God of this shore. The Superman doesn't need salvation from the other shore, the Superman can save himself. Nietzsche said the Superman is the meaning of the earth. This means the Superman doesn't need to tie the meaning of life to the illusory other shore. The Superman loves the earth of this shore, the Superman stands on the solid ground of this shore and can create values himself. The Superman legislates for himself, telling himself how he should live. And this has to be connected to the concept of will to power. Many concepts in Nietzsche's philosophy are interconnected. The will to power is a will wanting to create, wanting to start things, inclined to release life force. Making oneself stronger, more flourishing and lush. And this will to power can play a bigger role in the world of this shore after God is dead. Because before, it was God of the other shore teaching us how to live, we were all settling ourselves according to the values of the other shore. But now we can create values ourselves on the earth of the shore. Our will to power can finally be fully unleashed. This is a matter worthy of opening champagne. But not everyone will open champagne for this matter. Accordingly, Nietzsche distinguished two kinds of morality, or understood as two ways of life. One is called slave morality, the other is called master morality. This slave morality is the believers of Platonism mentioned before as well as Christians. Also including Schopenhauer, this kind of Buddhist ascetic. They just dare not create life value for themselves, they won't open champagne for God is dead. They will always use false faith in the other shore to deceive themselves and suppress their life force. Pinning life hope on illusory concepts. While master morality is the opposite, just like Lu Xun mentioned before said. True warriors dare to face the bleak life in dripping blood. Master morality is the morality of the Superman. The Superman creates life values himself on the barren earth, releasing his life force to the fullest. Redeeming himself. Using the words of French writer Romain Rolland, there is only one heroism in the world. That is to still love life after seeing the truth of life clearly. Nietzsche's advice is we should embrace master morality and discard slave morality. Slave morality is the withering of life, master morality is the released and blooming life. This is Nietzsche's diagnosis of nihilism and his solution. Good, having introduced Nietzsche's plan, let's introduce the next philosopher, Sartre's plan. In Sartre's view, why do we encounter nihilism? Sartre says this is because our human existence is inherently a kind of nothingness. How to say this? First, this has to start from a famous quote by Sartre we all know. That is, existence precedes essence. We have all heard the slogan of Sartre's philosophy, existence precedes essence. This sentence has even become a representative slogan of the entire philosophical school of existentialism. Let's first explain what this slogan means. Sartre first distinguished two kinds of existence, one is the existence of objects, one is the existence of humans. What is the existence of objects like? The existence of objects is essence precedes existence. What does this mean? For example, a cup. Before this cup was manufactured, its essence already existed first. Its essence is a cup, a container for holding water, this is its essence. And it cannot escape its essence, even if smashed it is a broken cup. But do humans have this fixed essence? Humans don't. Humans are not a ready-made defined existence, human essence is always waiting to be formed. A human can be a good person, can be a bad person, can be a programmer, can be a YouTuber. Humans always live facing possibilities, humans always constantly push themselves towards future possibilities. Man is nothing else but that which he subjectively chooses to become. Man will never be something, man is always becoming something. Sartre believes the difference between humans and all other objects lies in humans being free. Note that Sartre saying humans are free isn't like some other philosophers saying humans have free will. As if freedom is just one of human attributes. Sartre says humans are free, meaning human existence itself implies freedom. This is a kind of absolute freedom, because human existence itself is a kind of emptiness, a kind of nothingness. To facilitate our understanding of Sartre's philosophy, we might as well view these three concepts as interconnected or equivalent. That is human existence, nothingness, and freedom. Humans have no fixed essence, human existence itself is a kind of nothingness. Thus human existence itself implies a kind of absolute freedom. Humans are free, this sounds like a compliment to humans. How does that poem by Pedophile go? Life is dear, love is dearer. Both can be given up for freedom, freedom is often seen as the supreme value. But the freedom Sartre talks about isn't saying I can freely choose to eat fried chicken or sushi. This kind of freedom, the freedom Sartre talks about, is a fundamental predicament of humans. That is, you have no fixed essence, you are always living facing possibilities. And this situation of absolute freedom, to be honest, for many people is very terrifying. Because this means you have to constantly exert your subjective initiative to actively act. To create your own life meaning, and no one else can help you. You can only create life meaning for yourself. And this is so tiring. This means you never have a comfort zone, you always have to step out of the zone. Didn't philosopher from have a book called Escape from Freedom? Talking about this same principle, many people fear freedom and want to escape freedom. So they fall into a state of self-deception. And this self-deception is also a term in Sartre's philosophy, its French original is mauvaise foi. Translated into English as bad faith, actually simply put it as labeling oneself and lying to oneself. I am not a free person, I am not a person facing possibilities, I have an essence, I have labels. They all say I am a worker, yes I am a worker. They all say I am a YouTuber, yes I am a YouTuber. Then I just lie inside the labels I wove for myself, and feel very comfortable. Feel very complete, I hand over my entire body to these labels. I just need to live like a YouTuber, I don't need to make free choices myself. I become an object, become a thing where essence precedes existence. Sartre says you are lying to yourself, these labels are woven by others for you and you really believe them. You can't hand over your own body because no matter what you are free. In Sartre's words, man is condemned to be free. This is inescapable because human existence itself is nothingness. Good, this is Sartre's diagnosis of nihilism, human existence itself is a kind of nothingness. Having spoken of the diagnosis, let's talk about the solution to overcome it. Man is condemned to be free, human existential situation itself is nothingness, so what to do? Sartre actually doesn't stress overcoming this nothingness because this is the fundamental existential situation of humans. Instead, he believes such a fundamental situation of nothingness isn't a pessimistic thing. You escaping your own nothingness situation in self-deception, escaping freedom, is actually pathetic. Absolute human freedom is indeed a heavy burden for many people. Because freedom means you have to bear the responsibility brought by free choices. But absolute human freedom also implies human dignity and hope for human life. Imagine if humans were also a thing where essence precedes existence, then what meaning would your life have? A life already set in form is a life not worth living. Has everyone seen the sci-fi movie Arrival? There is a setting in this movie. That is, you gain a superpower to see your whole life at a glance. Able to know in advance what profession you will do, who you will marry, how many kids you will have. Even able to know in advance how you will die. You say such a life seen at a glance, it is stable indeed, but what point is there in living it? This isn't called living, this is called attending your own life. A truly meaningful life lies in it being a life always facing possibilities. Of course, Sartre says we are forever free, this doesn't mean you can become any appearance you want. The freedom Sartre talks about is a freedom in consciousness. It isn't saying I want to freely become a billionaire and I can definitely become a billionaire. But saying for a person there isn't a situation saying I have lived to this point and I am complete. Doesn't exist, you can always do something, can always make a difference. You always live facing possibilities, and this situation of always living facing possibilities opens up space for our active action. So Sartre's philosophy is a philosophy of action. He stresses we must constantly act. To actively shape the possibilities of our lives. Such a life is a non-greasy life. Although we are inescapably in a situation of nothingness. We shouldn't escape this situation, we should recognize this existential situation. The rest is to actively act. So the inspiration Sartre's action philosophy gives us can be simply summarized as recognize the situation and just do it. Good, having introduced Sartre, let's introduce the last philosopher of this program, Camus. Camus is a philosopher of the same era as Sartre and both are categorized as existentialist philosophers. But Camus himself did not admit to being an existentialist. And Camus doesn't count as a philosopher in the strict sense. Because unlike Sartre, who seriously wrote several philosophical treatises, Camus' output is almost all literary works like novels and plays. However, these literary works all express Camus' own philosophical thoughts. And a keyword of Camus' own philosophical thought is also his diagnosis of the cause of nihilism. This keyword is absurdity. What is absurdity? This absurdity is a feeling, a sense of absurdity. That is, we live in this world and feel all this is very absurd, very meaningless. That is, these things I do are very meaningless. Let's use a metaphor. For example, this video program I am making, it is very absurd. What point does it have? Writing a draft strains the brain, just like this issue after issue, changing so many topics. Does anyone watch? Nobody watches. Indeed, every extra issue made gains a bit more followers. But so what? Now it's hundreds of followers, thousands of followers, so what? Hundreds of thousands of followers, so what? Does having millions of subscribers prove this program you make is a meaningful, good program? It proves nothing, so making this program has no meaning. All this is very absurd. The source of this sense of absurdity isn't saying the world itself is absurd, but saying the world itself has no purpose and meaning of its own. As the saying goes, heaven and earth are unkind and treat all things as straw dogs. The world just exists there, not good, not bad, not sad, not happy. It itself isn't absurd. But the real source of the sense of absurdity lies in us humans always asking for purpose and meaning. So living in this world, we will always project our expectation for purpose and meaning onto this world, but we just said the world itself carries no purpose and meaning. Every time we want to ask the world for meaning, but the world gives us no answer. So we will always feel a deep sense of isolation between our existence and the world itself. This sense of isolation is the source of absurdity. The sense of absurdity is making us feel this world has nothing to do with me. For example, right now I am listening to my leader scolding me at the company. Suddenly a burst of absurdity comes. All things go silent. I just see the leader's mouth opening and closing there, not knowing what language he is speaking. At this time I can't help asking myself, does my life and these things I am doing have any meaning? I wake up early every day to squeeze into the subway to work, playing politics with colleagues, listening to leaders scolding. Getting off work, squeezing into subway home, collapsing on the sofa listening to wife nagging about new clothes she bought today. Repeating in cycles. Every day is such a life. Work and off work, get married, have kids. Have 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, be a mortgage slave, retire, then get old and put in a box. Now I look up and see the leader scolding me there nonstop. However, what does all this have to do with me? Whenever encountering this sense of absurdity, I stand still and suddenly feel all this around is so absurd. I deeply feel this world has nothing to do with me. Who am I? What am I doing? Why do I appear here? Camus gave a famous example for this sense of absurdity, which is the myth of Sisyphus. It says Sisyphus was a king in Greek mythology. Because he offended the gods sentenced him to a most severe punishment. This most severe punishment isn't killing him, but punishing him to push a giant rock to the mountain top. But every time Sisyphus exhausts his strength to push the rock to the top, the rock rolls down to the foot of the mountain. So Sisyphus has to push the rock back again, repeating in cycles. Sisyphus is forever doing such a repetitive and meaningless thing. The gods thought no punishment could be crueler than this. Camus says our human situation is like Sisyphus, doing repetitive and meaningless things every day, in deep absurdity. Good, this is Camus' diagnosis of nihilism. The cause is the sense of absurdity. This sense of absurdity stems from a deep isolation between our existence and the world itself. Good, having spoken of Camus' diagnosis, let's talk about his prescription. Facing the absurdity of existence, what should we do? The prescription Camus gave is facing absurdity. We have only one way out, which is to revolt against absurdity. Then specifically, how to revolt against absurdity. Camus says, generally speaking, facing absurd life, people usually have 3 reactions. Let's look at them one by one to see which one is the true revolt against absurdity. The first common reaction is suicide. The first sentence of Camus' book The Myth of Sisyphus is, there is only one truly serious philosophical problem. Suicide. If life has no meaning, then facing absurd life, why don't we commit suicide? But Camus immediately refuted this plan, because suicide is not a revolt against absurdity, but rather a surrender to absurdity. This is a coward's behavior. Physical suicide is not revolting against absurdity but escaping absurdity. Good, this is the first possible plan rejected by Camus. Then the second possible plan is throwing oneself into religious faith. Kierkegaard, whom we mentioned before, would agree with this second plan. But Camus believes the second plan is still not a revolt against absurdity. Why? In Camus' view, this second plan is deifying absurdity. Kierkegaard's belief because it is absurd is deifying absurdity. But absurdity itself is neither bad nor good, it is just there without reason. You deifying absurdity shows what? This shows in your heart you still can't let go of this sense of absurdity, this is still succumbing to absurdity, not revolting. And this second plan isn't much better than the first plan. Because the first plan is physical suicide. And this second plan of deifying absurdity is philosophical suicide. You just handed over all your rationality. Good. Having spoken of these first two plans, Camus believes the true revolt against absurdity is the third plan, enjoying the present. How to say this? This says yes, life is very absurd. But the reason you always harbor this sense of absurdity is because in your mind you are always thinking what purpose and meaning my life and these things I do can exchange for in the future. The problem lies in your craving for these meanings and purposes, precisely causing your isolation from the world and leading to absurdity. Where does life have so many purposes and meanings beyond life itself? Unrealistic expectations for purposes and meanings beyond life itself are the root cause of the sense of absurdity. So the prescription Camus gave is to accept meaninglessness. Don't think about what purpose and meaning your life has, the meaning of life lies in life itself. Purposes and meanings beyond life itself do not exist, everything lies in the process of life. Camus' meaning is a bit like the meaning of a movie from a few years ago called Soul. The protagonist in this movie spent so much effort insisting on finding that big purpose, big meaning in life. Big truth, big destination, finally only to find life doesn't have a specific big purpose. Big meaning, big truth, big destination, even that spark mentioned in the movie isn't the meaning of life. The meaning of life lies in life itself, lies in experiencing every moment of life. We need to realize those purposes and meanings we pursue that can only be cached in the future are illusory. Only then can we shift the center of our life from the future to the present. Don't ask what meaning and purpose the future can exchange for. We should enjoy the experience every present moment can bring us, whether it is pain or joy. The story of Sisyphus Camus talked about mentioned before only told the first half. This first half sounds like a tragedy, Sisyphus pushing the giant rock in cycles. But the second half of the story is Sisyphus understood. He understood his repetitive labor is meaningless, he accepted this meaninglessness. Facing absurd life, he adopted a contemptuous attitude. He doesn't attempt to gain any meaning from it anymore but an active attitude. Enjoying every moment, he pushes the stone. At the end of the book The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus wrote this: the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, just like the ice sculptor at the beginning. If he can understand this, he will also be happy. Finally, back to the question of making this program mentioned before, making this program seems to have no meaning. Regardless of whether it is hundreds of thousands of followers or millions of followers, it cannot prove making this program is meaningful. But the problem lies in you tangling with these meaning questions because you think too much. Just making a program, where do so many questions of meaning and purpose come from? You insist on living like a tool person. Let me ask you, if making this program can't exchange for anything, neither many people watch nor can it make money, is it interesting in itself? If it can't make you money, will you stop doing it? If even if it can't make you money you still feel doing it is quite interesting, isn't that enough? Good. This is Camus' diagnosis of nihilism and his plan. Below we enter the meeting summary. In this big question program we explored 5 diagnoses of nihilism and their corresponding solutions. Simply summarize, the keyword of Kierkegaard's diagnosis of nihilism is rationality. That is pursuing rationalism, objectivism and holism of Western metaphysics, leading to the forgetting of authentic individualized existence, thereby leading to nihilism. Targeting this diagnosis, the keyword of the prescription Kierkegaard prescribed is faith. That is abandoning rationalism and returning to faith. Faith is irrational, it doesn't lie in whether the thing you believe conforms to rationality, but in whether you dare to make a leap. The keyword of Schopenhauer's diagnosis of the cause of nihilism is desire. That is under the domination of the will to live, people always pursue satisfying their desires non-stop. Jumping from one desire vortex to another desire vortex, never ending, thus leading to nihilism. Then targeting this diagnosis, the keyword of the prescription Schopenhauer prescribed is asceticism. First, we can temporarily isolate our own desires through art aesthetics. Finally, we still have to move towards asceticism, completely giving up our desires. This way we can get rid of the domination of the will to live. The keyword of Nietzsche's diagnosis of the cause of nihilism is lie. On the surface, the collapse of faith in the other shore caused nihilism. Fundamentally, the cause of nihilism is the faith in the lie of the other shore itself. Because faith in the other shore suppressed the life force of the shore. Then, targeting this diagnosis, the keyword of the prescription Nietzsche prescribed is Superman. The Superman is the meaning of the earth. We don't need to pin the meaning of life on the illusory other shore, but should stand on the earth of the shore. Releasing our own life force, creating value of existence for ourselves, being our own redeemer. The keyword of Sartre's diagnosis of the cause of nihilism is nothingness. Sartre believes human existence is nothingness. Humans are existence without specific essence. Man is not something, man is what he is not. Targeting this diagnosis, the keyword of the prescription Sartre prescribed is action. Sartre believes humans cannot escape nor need to escape this situation of nothingness. Absolute human freedom instead opens up space for human active action. We should actively act to constantly shape our possible lives. Recognize the situation and just do it. The keyword of Camus' diagnosis of the cause of nihilism is absurdity. This sense of absurdity stems from a deep isolation between our existence and the world itself. Feeling the whole world has nothing to do with me. Targeting this diagnosis, the keyword of the prescription Camus prescribed is the present. We should accept meaninglessness, don't attempt to seek life purpose and meaning outside of life, but should enjoy the present life. The 5 diagnoses and corresponding prescriptions introduced in this program might have interconnected reasoning, but they adopted different perspectives of elaboration. Which perspective of elaboration do you think cuts closer to our true existential situation and makes more sense? Or can you provide a better diagnosis and solution you think of? Some friends might listen and feel before watching this program my life wasn't that void. Watching this program made me feel somewhat void. This won't happen, whether void or not is encountered by everyone in their own life form. It won't be that reading a book or watching a program makes you void. Maybe you eat a French meal tonight and you aren't void anymore. This program counts as philosophical wellness. What does this mean? It means as friends get older and gain more experience, you will find the world you live in isn't as simple and pure as the fairy tales understood in childhood. Then at this time the function of philosophical wellness lies in thinking about the root of nihilism when you aren't that void yet. And if encountering void, how you will overcome it. This is like getting a vaccine. Children growing up in sterile environments have poor immunity instead. As the saying goes, a little dirt never hurt anyone. Philosophical wellness can cultivate one's ability of anti-fragility in spirit. Just as Nietzsche said, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." Welcome you to participate in the discussion of this big question together with the philosophers. Their views are finished, now it's your turn to speak. Please cast your vote in the comments section below and express your views. We will see you next time, friends. Good night.